Because the people want to know, why did he get blackballed?
Yeah,
because in 30 years, I've done nothing but collect information, knowledge, and your secrets. So if you and a man was in a corner doing something you wasn't supposed to be doing,
you will tell it.
No, somebody come to tell me.
Okay.
I gather that, I value that, I'll pay for that. Not the guy that raises black children and ain't never done a hard in his life and don't have no stories of doing nobody dirt.
Katt Williams has dropped a bombshell that nobody in Hollywood wants you to hear. And this time, it's not just about shady contracts or secret societies. No, this time it's about Malcolm Jamal Warner, the actor most of us grew up watching on The Cosby Show. According to Katt Williams, hidden recordings exist, real tapes that prove Malcolm Jamal Warner never truly disappeared from the industry the way we thought. Instead, these recordings suggest he's still alive, still moving in the shadows, and most shockingly, that he's been hiding from none other than Bill Cosby himself.
It's my job as the king to show up and chastise thee. And if God lets me know it's a good time for that, that's how I'm going to write it up and deliver it.
I know how wild this sounds at first, but let's break it down carefully, step by step, because when you start connecting the dots, things stop looking like conspiracy and start feeling like reality. To understand why this revelation is so explosive, you have to go back to who Malcolm Jamal Warner was in the first place. Most of us remember him as Theo Huxtable, the witty, lovable son of Cliff and Claire Huxtable on The Cosby Show. That role made Malcolm one of the most recognizable young black actors of the 1980s and 90s. He was talented, charismatic, and had the kind of career trajectory that should have made him a lifelong star in Hollywood. But something strange happened. Despite his talent, his fame, and his connections, Malcolm's career stalled. He never reached the level of superstardom that many believed was his destiny. Instead, he seemed to fade into the background. Yes, he took on projects here and there, guest appearances, small films, even some music projects. But it was nothing compared to the household name status he once held. And here's the kicker. Industry insiders whispered that Malcolm knew too much, that working so closely with Bill Cosby gave him access to truths that he wasn't supposed to share. Remember, this was a time when Cosby was untouchable, the so-called America's dad. Nobody dared to cross him. If Malcolm really did see or hear things, staying silent might have been his only option, or so we thought. Now let's fast forward.
Thought that I could show that. And when I wrote it out to kill the careers of the people I was talking about, right? But it was so vicious that I erased all of the knockout blows and just left the jabs so that the comic I'm talking about knows that I know your real story.
We all know Katt Williams doesn't hold back. Over the years, he's exposed the industry more times than we can count. He's spoken about rituals, contracts, sacrifices, and the dark side of Hollywood. And every time, people call him crazy. Until later, when more information comes out and suddenly, Katt doesn't sound so crazy anymore. So when Katt recently said there are hidden recordings connected to Malcolm Jamal Warner, people started paying attention. According to Katt, these recordings are not rumors. They're actual audio files where Malcolm himself can be heard talking about being alive, but forced to stay in hiding because of threats. And the shocking part, Katt claims those threats came directly from Bill Cosby's circle. Think about that for a second. Bill Cosby, a man once praised as a family-friendly icon, later revealed to have lived a double life filled with allegations of drugs and assaults, could also be the reason Malcolm vanished from the spotlight. If that's true, then the Malcolm we thought simply walked away from Hollywood might actually be living under constant fear. But why would recordings even exist in the first place? Well, that's the beauty and the danger of audio evidence. Words can be denied, but recordings speak for themselves. Katt claims these tapes were never meant to go public. They were allegedly made by Malcolm as a form of protection. Imagine being in his shoes, working around powerful men, hearing their secrets, and knowing that if you ever stepped out of line, your career or your life could be in danger, so you record, you document, because one day you might need proof. If true, these recordings would explain a lot. Why Malcolm never made a big comeback, why his name barely appears in Hollywood discussions, why his story, despite being part of one of the biggest TV shows in history, isn't told with the same glory as his co-stars. And if you've been following how Hollywood operates, you know that sometimes people don't just fade away. Sometimes they're pushed out, deliberately. Now here's where it gets chilling. We all know Bill Cosby's reputation has been destroyed in the last decade. Dozens of women came forward with allegations that shocked the world. The man who once represented family values turned out to be hiding some of the darkest secrets in the entertainment industry. But here's the thing. If even half of what Katt is saying is true, then Malcolm Jamal Warner might not have been just a co-star. He might have been a witness, someone who knew the real Cosby long before the public found out. Think about it. Malcolm was young, smart, and very close to Cosby during the height of the Cosby Show. If he saw something, if he knew about the kind of power games being played behind the scenes, then Cosby would have every reason to silence him. And that's exactly what these hidden recordings suggest. That Malcolm wasn't just another actor who faded away. He was someone who got too close to the truth and paid the price by being forced into hiding. So the big question is this: if these recordings exist, why haven't we heard them yet? Why hasn't the media picked this story up? And most importantly, if Malcolm Jamal Warner really is alive and hiding, what does that say about the industry we all watch and support? Because remember, if they can make someone as famous as Malcolm Jamal Warner disappear, what does that mean for everyone else in Hollywood? Why Cosby might have wanted Malcolm gone, and how the industry continues to keep stories like this buried. When Katt Williams first hinted at these hidden recordings, most people thought it was just another wild claim from a comedian known for speaking his mind. But as always, the devil is in the details. What makes this revelation different is that Katt didn't just drop the claim and move on. He stood firm, insisting that these recordings are out there and that they expose far more than people realize. If Malcolm really left behind audio tapes of his own voice, it means he was trying to leave a trail, something that would prove what he knew and why he disappeared. That alone changes the entire conversation. According to the whispers surrounding this situation, the recordings allegedly feature Malcolm talking about his fear of being followed, about the pressure he felt from people close to Bill Cosby. Famous, if you think about it, it's not hard to believe. Bill Cosby had immense power in Hollywood during the 80s and 90s. He wasn't just a star, he was a kingmaker. If you were in his good graces, your career flourished. If you crossed him, you might never work again. That level of control is terrifying because it means one man could dictate who rose to fame and who vanished from the spotlight. Now imagine being Malcolm Jamal Warner, a young actor right in the middle of it all. He would have seen things that fans could never imagine. The parties, the conversations behind closed doors, the way powerful men operated when the cameras weren't rolling. If those recordings really capture Malcolm describing all this, then suddenly his slow fade from Hollywood doesn't look like a natural career decline. It looks like an exile. And when Katt Williams suggests that Malcolm has been forced into hiding, it paints an even darker picture. It suggests Malcolm might have survived, but at the cost of his freedom, always looking over his shoulder, always wondering if telling the truth would cost him his life. One detail that keeps surfacing in conversations about these recordings is the mention of Cosby's circle. We all know Bill Cosby himself has faced accusations that destroyed his reputation, but people forget that he didn't act alone. He had handlers, assistants, lawyers, and loyalists who would go to any length to protect his image and his empire. If Malcolm ever spoke out, it wouldn't just threaten Cosby. It would threaten everyone who had a stake in keeping those secrets buried. That's why the idea of recordings is so dangerous. Unlike rumors or testimony, recordings don't rely on memory or interpretation. They are hard evidence, and in Hollywood, evidence like that can be the difference between someone living comfortably in the spotlight or vanishing into silence. Katt Williams pointing to hidden recordings also raises another question. If they exist, why haven't they surfaced publicly? There are two possibilities. One, the recordings are being held by someone who knows their value and is waiting for the right moment to release them. Or two, they were suppressed the moment someone powerful realized they existed. Think about how many times stories in the entertainment world suddenly disappear from the news cycle. A story breaks, people start talking, then within a few days it's gone, buried under fresh headlines. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens because there are forces working to control the narrative. If these recordings mention names, places, or specific incidents, then the push to suppress them would be enormous. And let's not forget, Katt Williams himself has been a target for years. Every time he exposes something about Hollywood, he suddenly ends up in some controversy, an arrest, a scandal, a viral moment that makes him look unstable. It's almost predictable. Some people believe that's not coincidence, that it's retaliation. If he's sticking his neck out to talk about Malcolm Jamal Warner, then it means he's willing to risk even more backlash. Katt knows that the quickest way to silence someone in Hollywood is to destroy their reputation. If you can't refute what they're saying, you make the public stop believing in them. That's why it's so important to pay attention when someone like Katt speaks. He's risking everything just to get a piece of the truth out. But let's step back for a moment and ask ourselves why Malcolm specifically would have been such a threat. After all, there were plenty of actors on The Cosby Show. Why him? The answer might lie in his closeness to Cosby. Theo wasn't just a background character. He was the son. That meant Malcolm spent years working side by side with Bill Cosby, both on set and behind the scenes. He wasn't an occasional guest star. He was family, at least in the public's eyes, and because of that, he likely had access that others didn't. He would have been in dressing rooms, on private calls, in hotel suites during tours, and in environments where the mask could slip. If he saw the real Cosby, if he heard the kinds of conversations Cosby was having when no one else was around, then he knew far more than the public could ever suspect. There's also the issue of timing. Malcolm's career decline coincides suspiciously with the period when Cosby's image began to quietly unravel in the industry. Long before the public knew anything, insiders were aware of the allegations. They just weren't speaking out. If Malcolm decided he couldn't be part of that silence, that's when the danger started. And if he tried to document what he knew through recordings, it would explain why he suddenly went from household name to near obscurity. It wasn't just Hollywood forgetting about him, it was Hollywood making sure he was forgotten. The most disturbing part is the suggestion that Malcolm isn't gone at all, but deliberately hiding. Katt didn't just say Malcolm was silenced, he said Malcolm is alive. That's a bold claim. It means somewhere, out of the spotlight, Malcolm Jamal Warner could still be living with the weight of secrets he can't share. And if that's true, then we're not just dealing with a tragic career story. We're dealing with a man who has been pushed into exile by the very industry he helped shape. Imagine carrying that kind of burden, knowing that one wrong move could put you in danger. Imagine hearing your name slowly vanish from the culture while the people who silenced you continue to thrive. So the bigger question becomes, if Katt is right, what happens next? Do these recordings ever surface? Does Malcolm himself ever step forward to confirm or deny? Or do we remain in the dark, left to piece together clues while the truth stays hidden? Hollywood has always thrived on controlling the narrative, but sometimes the truth slips through the cracks. And when it does, it changes everything. If even a fraction of what Katt says is real, then this story could blow open the industry in ways we haven't seen since the first allegations against Cosby. And maybe that's why it feels so urgent to discuss it now, before the silence swallows it completely. If there's one thing we've learned about Hollywood, it's that nothing happens by accident. Careers don't just rise and fall without reason. Stories don't just appear in the headlines and then vanish without someone pulling strings. And when you take that understanding and apply it to Malcolm Jamal Warner's story, suddenly everything feels intentional. It feels like a carefully orchestrated erasure. The idea that Malcolm could be alive and hiding is hard for some people to accept, but think about the alternatives. If he truly faded away, why has there been almost no genuine update on his life? No big reunion appearances, no interviews reflecting on his career. Most actors from that era, even if they step away from the spotlight, eventually resurface for nostalgia projects or documentaries. Yet with Malcolm, the silence has been almost absolute. That silence is exactly why Katt Williams' claims hit so hard, because they explain what so many fans have wondered about for years. Now, one of the theories surrounding the recordings is that Malcolm may have left behind coded messages, not just straightforward confessions. People close to him say he was always careful, never reckless, and knew the risks of speaking openly about powerful people. If those tapes exist, it's possible they're layered with meaning, the kind of content that only makes full sense once you know the bigger picture. That would explain why the recordings haven't been used as a smoking gun yet. They may need context, interpretation, or someone like Katt Williams to connect the dots publicly. And this is where Bill Cosby's shadow looms largest. We've already seen how long it took for the world to face the truth about him. For decades, his victims were silenced, ignored, or dismissed. It wasn't until overwhelming evidence came out that the narrative finally broke. So imagine if Malcolm tried to warn people earlier. Would anyone have believed him? Or would they have called him bitter, jealous, or crazy? The sad truth is that Malcolm might have been one of the first casualties of protecting Cosby's empire, his silence bought with fear while the machine kept running. Katt Williams calling attention to this now also says a lot about timing. Why speak up in 2025? Some people believe it's because the industry is shifting. With social media, independent voices, and podcasts, it's harder than ever for Hollywood to control every narrative. Once upon a time, a story like this could be buried in a heartbeat. Today, it spreads too quickly. Even if mainstream outlets ignore it, people online keep the conversation alive. That's why Katt speaking about hidden recordings feels so dangerous for those who want the truth buried. His voice amplifies what was supposed to remain hidden, but let's also consider the human side of this. If Malcolm really is alive and in hiding, what does his life look like now? Imagine being cut off from the industry that raised you, the fans that loved you, and the career you were meant to have. Imagine constantly looking over your shoulder, knowing that your silence keeps you safe, but your story remains untold. It's tragic. It's the kind of story that no actor signs up for when they enter Hollywood. And it makes you realize just how high the stakes are when you're dealing with powerful men who will protect their secrets at any cost. For the audience, the question becomes how to process this information. Do you dismiss it as another conspiracy theory? Or do you look at the pattern of how the industry operates? Because if you look closely, Malcolm's story is not unique. How many other actors have mysteriously disappeared from the spotlight? How many whistleblowers have been labeled unstable, only for their claims to be validated years later? The industry thrives on distraction. While you're busy watching the latest scandal, the real secrets stay buried. That's why it's important to approach stories like this with open eyes. The possibility of hidden recordings existing also forces us to think about accountability. If tapes truly prove that Malcolm Jamal Warner is alive and hiding from Bill Cosby, then who's responsible for keeping him in the shadows? Is it just Cosby and his inner circle? Or is it the larger system of executives, producers, and networks who have a vested interest in keeping certain truths out of the public eye? Because let's be honest, Cosby wasn't operating alone. The silence of others enabled him. And if Malcolm's story threatens to expose how deep that silence went, it makes sense why his voice had to be erased. Katt Williams' boldness is a reminder that truth has a way of surfacing, even when people try to suppress it. He's not the first to risk his reputation for speaking out, and he won't be the last. But his involvement in this story forces people to pay attention because Katt has a track record of exposing things before they become mainstream news. That's why people who normally roll their eyes at conspiracy theories are giving this one a second look. Because if Katt says hidden recordings exist, you have to at least consider the possibility that he knows more than he's saying. As we close this discussion, the lingering questions remain. If Malcolm Jamal Warner is alive, what will it take for him to come forward? If recordings exist, when will they surface, and who will be brave enough to release them? And most importantly, if the story is true, what does it reveal about the industry that has shaped so much of our culture? These are not just entertainment questions. They're questions about power, truth, and the price of silence. One thing is certain: Hollywood has never been what it seems. Behind the glitz and glamour, there are shadows darker than most of us can imagine. Malcolm Jamal Warner's story, if real, is proof of that. A man once loved by millions, hidden away because he knew too much. A trail of recordings that might one day break the silence, and an industry desperate to make sure we never hear them. For now, all we can do is keep asking questions, keep connecting the dots, and refuse to let the silence win. Because if Katt Williams is right, then the truth about Malcolm Jamal Warner isn't just a Hollywood scandal. It's a warning about how far powerful people will go to protect themselves. And the moment those recordings finally see the light of day, everything we thought we knew about The Cosby Show, about Bill Cosby, and about Hollywood itself may never be the same again.